Hey guys, welcome back to the Silverback Show. Today we're going to be talking about risk-taking and adventure, the highlights of all childhood from the beginning of time until our sophisticated society thought that we were smarter than nature and smarter than childhood, and we began to put restrictions on everything a child can do. One of the main reasons why I home educated my children was because I wanted to experiment with giving them a little bit of freedom in childhood to find themselves without other people, educators, social workers, psychologists telling them who they were and what they thought they should be doing at all times with their lives. And risk-taking, as we know from the psychology and from experience, is a huge part of what separates those people who actually go after and create what they want in their lives, whether it's flying an airplane for the first time or doing a 360 on a skateboard or a bicycle. There's something about taking chances that children have to be left alone and free to do. The huge difference between my father's generation to my generation to my children's generation, is in a sense of freedom that children in childhood had to be left alone from the adult world for a certain period of time. And that being left alone in the adult world for a certain period of time is a way that boys and girls are learning to sort things out. So we talked about the natural hierarchies and pecking orders that happen. We talked about King of the Mountain. Let me give you just a few more examples of why time alone in nature is vital. And why I say nature is because nature is a place where kids can be left alone and there's maybe 1% of the places in nature now today where children are going to be eaten by a bear, killed by a mountain lion, or something else. But what they can learn is profoundly missing in most children's lives, unless their parents just happen to be coincidentally or luckily or have selected to find a place where there's enough nature around to let them explore freely. So my children were born and raised and grew up on the seashore, and the seashore was their front yard. And for a big chunk of their life, prior to, being part of organized, socialized groups such as soccer teams and organized events, my children's childhood had a lot of freedom in it to just explore. Let's just start with the ocean. By 2 years old, a child gets knocked down by the ocean current coming in, and he now has enough memory and bodily wisdom that he can have his back turned, and by the sound of the waves crashing behind him can run up the shore without even looking. Okay? That's risk adverse experience that children learn. They dive into a pool of water and they hold their breath. They dive another time and they hold their breath a little bit longer. They're challenging their lungs, they're challenging their bodies, they're challenging their minds. You gotta be left alone to do it. When we were kids, we used to go the length of the pool and back holding our breath. The length of a pool and back holding our breath. I'd be lucky if I could go the length of the pool today. In this place, in a place, I don't even want to say where this place is because I respect the people's privacies up in these areas. But let's just say somewhere around the North Fork of the Feather River. There's plenty of rivers and streams and waterfalls and places where children of all ages go to hang out, to get away from parents, to take some risk. And I would go there with my kids and watch as the youngest of my kids would jump from 12 feet into a pool of water. 12 feet. 12 feet at 6 years old is like, wow. And I recall as vividly as if it was yesterday, I was laying on this rock sunning, and there was a waterfall out there. This waterfall is coming into this pool area, and it's having a current. So to get across the current to the other side, you had to swim pretty hard. And on the other side was cliffs that were 12 feet high, 20 feet high, and 30 feet high. And maybe even higher than 30 feet. I don't, I'll have to ask my kids and actually get back to you on the exact heights. So I had heard about somebody seriously hurting himself. I don't know if he was killed. I don't know if he broke a bone or what he did, but he had dove or jumped off the highest point. Maybe he was high, maybe he had alcohol, and he missed. So here's my, I don't know, at the time he must have been 13 years old. Here's my 13-year-old, 14-year-old son who looks like the statue of David. His body is sculpted and perfectly lean and muscular. And he's got to go to this highest point and leap. And I can't even stomach it. But it's when his 11-year-old daughter wanted to do it that I really freaked out. So there was the 12-foot jump, the 20-foot jump, and then the highest one. And she went to the middle jump, and I did what all fathers would do with their 11-year-olds in this moment, and I said, nuh-uh-uh. And what did the good daughter do? She got down from the rocks, she swam across the current, she came over and said, Papa, it's okay. If you don't want me to do it, I won't do it. And of course, my heart broke in this moment. And I looked at this child who had this force and this energy in her. And I looked at her and I saw her and I said, do you have to do it? And she said, and that's what life is about. And that's what Gibran was saying, that we're the bows, our children are the arrows, and life is the force that carries them. And it's not ours. So I watched as my daughter did this jump, and I watched as she swam back over here. And something grew inside of her that has made her the fearless, fierce woman she is today. My son, the same son that jumped off of here, when he was 10 years old, I was doing some construction work over at somebody's house, and he was out playing, and he was running on the edge of someone's perimeter wall, which was jagged rock. He slips, falls, and slices his knee almost completely off. That scar is a war wound that he carries to this day and passes on to his son. And you can't take that away from a child. Now, let's fast forward. We used to have this getaway into this nature reserve that if we got in, and because of my work schedule and my working at home, and because of our home education and our not being dependent upon someone else's timetable, we could take our family into this nature reserve not too far from our home on the weekdays, early mornings when nobody was around. And it was a wonderful place for my wife to relax and heal and rejuvenate. And it was a wonderful place for the kids to just go free. There were no bobcats. There were no mountain lions. There were no... Actually, there might have been a bobcat. I saw one bobcat there when I was a kid. At this time, there was no bobcats, but bobcats are shy. There were no mountain lions. There were no bears. There were no snakes. There were cliffs. There were cliffs. There was poison oak. There was bugs. Now, this was a place that we went with our family, with our kids, so the kids could experience a sense of freedom away from all these paranoid adults who were trying to limit them from exploring and finding themselves. My kids knew every inch of this territory. They crawled through canyon bluffs. They dropped down cliffs. They ran after each other, shooting their homemade bow and arrows. And they ran bare-ass naked. Bare-ass naked. Bare-ass naked. There was not a human being around. They were primitive, wild kids in an environment that I thought was the best environment for them to find something on their own for once in their life without interference. It was a way of finding self-expression and fierceness and toughness and all kinds of things that nature brings out in those families and kids that are lucky to have such an experience. So one day, so this is up on the cliffs, and then down below there's this primitive coastal area, untouched for millennia by man. Go there in the morning, we're on our way back, my wife and I holding hands. We're just so happy to be cruising and not having to stress about kids crashing through glass windows and doing all kinds of things that happen inside a home or get run over by a car. They were way up ahead of us, a good quarter mile ahead of us. And they had to go around this cliff and get around the cliff, and the cliff then went up to the trail that hiked back up to those bluffs, and they knew where they were going. And there was a group. There was a group of them, but they got stopped at that cliff. And from far away, I could see already that there was an adult there, and already I understood one thing: this adult was interfering with my kids. And by the time I got up there, this guy was lecturing me about he was a social worker. And here's what I want to say about you social workers. Get out of people's way and let children find their own way without prescribing your fear into their brains. The same with psychologists. Get out of a child's head if you're going to put your self-prescribed limitations on their brains. The same goes for teachers. Now, when I was a kid, we would go to school early in the morning before school started, and we would play, what was that ball game? You got that little rubber ball. They made a big sport out of it and a movie out of it, and you take that ball and beam the other person. There was a line in the middle, and there was 10 kids on this side and 10 kids on that, and you could either catch it or avoid it. But if you got hit by it and it dropped, you're out. I forget what it's called. It'll come to my brain pretty soon. Now, man, we would beam that ball at each other and bump people out so fast because we wanted to be the winners. Then we would get on the jungle gyms. And my sisters would get on those jungle gyms, and they were like monkeys, man. Monkeys just spinning around, doing flips. Do you think they didn't fall? Yes, they fell on their faces. And then they get back up and they do it again and again and again and again and again until they got a skill level. Some schools take jungle gyms out of the play area. Oh, you want to sanitize childhood. That's why I home educated my children. That's one of the primary reasons. I didn't want my kids to grow up in a sanitized play environment. I didn't want them to grow up with psychologists and educators and administrators trying to control their every move. I didn't want a boy of mine to like a girl and get a pink slip to go home because he was flirting with a girl or trying to kiss a girl. I didn't want that. I wanted them to have a moment where we were out of their way. Finding fearlessness, finding ferocity, finding their ability to jump off cliffs into pools of water, and coming home with their war wounds, but their pride and their intact memory of what they would do better next time. Okay, that's my allow your children to take risks. Look up Last Child in the Woods. Name's not popping in my head right now. Last Child in the Woods is a brilliant testament of how we have allowed our fear to legalize childhood so that it doesn't exist anymore the way nature designed it. Namaste, namaste, namaste. Parenting is a lifelong crusade, and it's all about understanding the difference between the bow and the arrow and who is which and the force in between.